Hi guys! Now that we have covered how we can import data from an Excel or CSV file and how to select, for instance, a specific worksheet, and we have learned how we can scrap quickly a table online using pd.read.html, we are going now to play with our data frame. For the second part, we are going to use this specific data frame. If you want to get this data frame, the only thing that you're gonna have to do, just gonna have to rewrite this line of code and you will be able to get this data frame. Okay, let's start as usual by importing our initial libraries, which are NumPy and Pandas, and re-import our data from Wikipedia. Perfect. And now we can just double check if we have the data. Everything looks good. We can now start our second part, which is going to be composed by 4 points. We are going to start by learning how we can select specific column. There is 2 different ways. Then we are going to select one of this column and choose it as an index. That's going to be the column location, but we're going to talk about it. Select a row, add a column, and drop a column or row. Okay guys, let's get started. First of all, we are going to start by selecting our data frame and save it inside a variable that we are going to call df, like data frame, past our data. And what we're going to do to be sure that everything has been printed correctly, we are going to print the data frame. Okay. Inside the data frame, we have different locations in Texas and the range of temperatures during the months of August and January. For instance, if you look at Dallas in Texas, the range of temperature in Fahrenheit is going to be between 77 and 96 degrees Fahrenheit, and in January that's going to be between 3 and 16 Celsius degrees. Okay, now that we have our data frame, we are going to cover the 2 different ways in order to select a column using Pandas. The first way to select a column gonna be to select df and use dots and a specific column name. For instance, in this case, we're gonna type df.location, and what's gonna happen, we are going to select specifically the column location. The second way to select a column using Pandas and to focus on a specific column gonna be to use square brackets. For instance, in this case, let's just start by selecting the column location, execute. That's another way of selecting a specific column. And now, for instance, if you want more data, we are just going to select January, for instance, like an error, key error. Okay, yes, okay. As you can see, that raised an error, and you have to select your column inside another square bracket to have it as a list. Let's do it and let's execute. Okay, now we have selected our 2 columns, which are location and the month of January. Yeah, and as you can see here, when you select it, you have the index, which is by default 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, depend of the number of rows. And if you want to have, for instance, here what can be useful is to have directly the location inside this index column. That's something which is not mandatory, but just a good way of using is to select one of these columns as an index. You will see why index can be useful at a later stage. Okay, let's do it. Let's select a specific column and set it up as an index. If you want to select a column and set it up as an index, you have to type df.setIndex. You have set axis, select the type. You have to select set index, And once you have selected the set index, what you're gonna have to do, you're gonna have to select the name of your column, of the column that you want to select as an index, and paste it. And if you look at it now, up, location are now used as an index, and you have all the different data. And if you want to confirm, because now if you look at the data frame again, for instance, if you print df, you will see that the change have not been operated. They've just been operated locally inside this cell. But if you want to make, if you want to avoid to have like a temporary change, if you want to make it in place, what you're gonna have to add, you're just gonna have to add in place equal true, and this change will not be temporary anymore. That's gonna be definitive. It's gonna be a definitive change. Let's do it and let's check now. Yeah, now the change is definitive. And again, now if you look at it, for instance here, if you just want to select January, you will have the same type of data. And here, if you want just to, let's take the same line and just select January, you will see that the type of data will be different. Let's look at it. Yeah, now you have directly Houston, San Antonio, Austin, El Paso as an index, and you have the temperature. And for instance, if you want to add like specific column, let's say we can add square brackets and create a new list. Add a different column. Let's say instead of January, we're gonna use August, and close it with square brackets. August, and execute. Okay, we forgot square brackets. Let's execute. Yeah. Now, as you can see, you have your location, which is automatically given. Because here, for instance, what we have done previously, we had to select the column location, but now whatever column you're gonna select, the column location is now an index. So that's not anymore 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's the location, which means like, and you can call as much column as you want, you will always have the location on the left side. Okay, it's totally something which is totally not mandatory to add it as an index, but that's a good way of using your data frame. Okay, now that we have learned how we can select a column by using either df dot and the column name, or df and using your column name inside the square bracket, we are going to explore a third way of using Pandas, is how you can select, for instance, a specific city. Here we are going to select the city of Houston, or let's say we are going to select the city of Laredo in Texas. Let's do it. If you want to select the city, what you're gonna have to do, you're gonna have to use dflock. Let's do it for Houston. That's gonna be even easier. Okay. The first way of selecting a row, there is two ways as well. The first way is df.lock, which means df.locate, and you're gonna locate a specific row. Here we are going to locate for Houston. That's located. The other way of using Pandas to select a specific row gonna be to use df.ilock. And for here, for instance, we are going to select the row number 4, because the first one corresponds to 0, 1, 2, and 3. And dflock 3 corresponds to the row number 4. Let's execute. And here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, Austin. And be the row number 4. And if you look at the temperatures that correspond, for instance, in Austin, Texas, the temperature range is between 5 and 16 Celsius degrees. Okay. Now that you have seen the two different ways to select specific row, we are going to see how you can add a specific column to your data frame. And all this type of skills is going to be very, very useful on the long term inside the course, because that can sound something silly, but for instance, if you want the data for a specific date, just by using df.loc, you will be able to locate the type of data that you want. That's gonna be even more useful than using iloc, because when you're using iloc, you must know what's inside a specific row. But that's a different way of selecting a row using Pandas. Now, let's explore fourth point, which is how to add column to your data frame. What you're gonna do here, we are going to add a column which we are going to call new, and the column new gonna be filled by a value 0. That's something that can be useful mainly when you want to backtest. That's a way to create like a column, a blank column, is to filling it by 0 and after creating some condition. But you're gonna see that afterward in the course. But here, as an example, it's just how you can add a column using Pandas. df new equals 0. And now if you look at your data frame df, you will see that the column which is named new has been added. Similarly, you can now, for instance, drop a column. For instance, if you want to drop this column new that you have just created right now, what you're gonna have to do, you're just gonna have to type df dot drop, and between parentheses you're gonna have to select the name of the column that you want to drop and the axis. By default, the axis is 0, which means that when the axis is 0, that corresponds to the row, and axis 1 corresponds to the column. Let's do it. Yeah, I'm just gonna give you this extra information right here inside the workbook. Axis 0 equal rows, and axis 1 equal column. Here, what we have done, we have asked Python to drop us the column new, which is on the axis 1, which is a column. And again, if you look at the data frame right now, you will see that the column have not disappeared. But that makes sense, because similarly to what we have done with the index, if you want to make a permanent change, where is the index here? Just right here. If you want to make a permanent change, you have to add the argument in place equal true, because if you don't do that, your change is going to be just temporary change, which means the change will just going to affect this specific cells, but not all the cells. That's why if you want to make a permanent change, you have to add the function in place equal true. Let's copy and paste it right here. Execute, and let's look at the data file now. Let's remove that from here, and if you look at the data file now, as data frame now, you will see that the column has disappeared. Now, to conclude this second part about Pandas, we are going to explore how to drop a row. It's going to be very similar to what we have done on how to drop a column. If you remember, axis equal 1 corresponds to the column, and axis equal 0 corresponds to the rows. Similarly to what we have done right here, we are just going to change the name of the axis from axis 1 to axis equals 0, and instead of selecting a column name, we are going to select a row name. Here, for instance, we are going to select Dallas, Texas, and select Dallas has disappeared from the data frame. I hope you take insightful knowledge from this video. That's very basic knowledge about Pandas, but that's nice to learn how to play with the data frame, which means how to select a specific column. For instance, if you want August temperatures, you want the column name location. You have two different ways: df.location, df. the name of the column, or df and selecting your column name inside a list. Second way that we have explored is how to set an index, which means how to set up one of these columns as an index. And the advantage to have an index, because whatever column you can call, you will always have the index on your left side. After that, how to select a row. So two different ways, either using iLock and the number of the row, or using df.lock and the name of the row, which means here, for instance, that's Houston. That's gonna work well for Dallas as well. Like whatever gonna be the row name that you want, you're gonna be able to locate it. After that, we have seen how to add a column by using df dot and the name of the column inside square brackets equal and the value that you want. The third way is how to drop a column and a row, and we have seen the importance of specifying the name of the axis. If you want to drop a column, you have to select axis equals 0, and if you want to select a row, if you want to drop a row, you have to select axis equals 0, and if you want to drop a column, you have to select axis equal 1 and specify the name of the column or the name of the row. Okay, in the next part we are going to explore conditional formatting using Pandas, and see you in the next video.